Became a second lieutenant in the infantry, and due to his background in working for Firestone, a rubber company, he became an infantry motor officer. He served in the 8th Army Replacement Depot in Incheon, Korea, where he helped get replacement troops to the front lines. When he returned to the United States, he went back to Firestone, and they made him an executive in Akron in 1957. He met his wife, they had a son and a daughter, and he became an executive with General Tire, where he then worked for another 25 years. He is an active member of the Akron Korean War Veterans Chapter, currently serving as the chapter activities chairman. Please welcome William Niebuhr.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the people of Cuyahoga Falls for the tremendous reception that we received today. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only time in 60 years that the Korean War veterans have been given any recognition. It's a very rare occasion, and I am so proud to see so many veterans, not only of the Korean War, but of the other wars, World War II, Vietnam, who have come out here today to honor the veterans of the Korean War. The Senator mentioned the fact that this is called the Forgotten War, and I thought I'd take a few minutes to explain to you why this is really called the Forgotten War. In 1950, if you recall, the older people, we were in a Cold War with Russia in Europe. Europe had been pretty well destroyed. Russia was on the west, or on the east, and the Western Allies were on the German, France, Belgium, on the eastern or western side. All the attention was being paid to the Cold War. The tension was terrible. The nations got together in Europe and formed the NATO, North American Treaty Organization. We were busy rearming the people in Europe because we were afraid of the things that the Russians were going to do. This was given all of the attention. The countries over there had been devastated. So we had what's called the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was over there helping the Europeans to rebuild their countries. All the attention, all the material was being sent over to the NATO and the Marshall Plan because these are the people who had the great need. In the Far East, we were building a democracy. There was not a lot of destruction, but we had to convert these people into understanding what a democracy was, and we were forming a constitution. This was a peace mission over in the Far East. This was a war situation over in Europe. This is the part that got all of the attention until in June of 1950, in a tiny little country the size of the state of Indiana, a force of 130,000 Russian-trained North Korean troops with Russian T-34 tanks, with Russian MiG aircraft crossed the line into South Korea, who had no army. The 60,000 men they had were there almost to act as a National Guard. Harry Truman realized that there was a problem. The military didn't think so. The military thought that, well, Korea's a diversion, and all the action's going to happen in Europe. And believe it or not, they turned around and they sent 2 more divisions over to Europe to defend Europe. Now, what did they have over in the Far East, which is called police action? And when Harry Truman called it a police action, that was a very bad mistake on his part. But he did it because his only other choice was to get Congress to declare Korea a war, and he wasn't sure of the ground that he had to stand on. In Europe, they had all the finest weapons. They had the newer weapons. Everything was being furnished to NATO. In the Far East, we had everything that was left over from World War II. Some of the fellows swear to God that some of the stuff they had was from World War I. I'd like to take a little bit of time here, if you don't mind, just to share some of the stories of these fellows that are here today, and things that today probably wouldn't be tolerated. As an example, it was said that there was a train heading north towards China with 800 American prisoners on it. They mounted a parachute attack at Munstani to rescue the 800 American POWs. The paratroopers, when they arrived, found that the train was in a tunnel. The train was empty. The reason the train was empty was because the communists had taken the 800 troops, marched them out into a field, and machine gunned and killed them all. Most of you never heard this story before. Can you imagine what would happen today if 800 of anything was killed out there? The world would be up in arms. In Korea, it isn't even one of the things that are very widely known. When the war first started, the weapons were from World War II, but the military that were in Japan were there for a peace mission. So their purpose was to help the people to form a democracy. They were not given severe field training like the North Koreans were. War started, we didn't have enough troops to send over there. Who got a rifle? A baker, a clerk, a cook, a truck driver. Anyone who could squeeze the trigger on a weapon was sent over to Korea, where our casualties were unbelievable. We didn't have enough ammunition. Several of our members who went over there in the first part of the war, one of them was a mortar man. When they first went over there, they got 10 mortar shells a day, per day. Ladies and gentlemen, they can fire 10 mortar shells in 1 minute. And if they had sufficient ammunition to fight those hordes, we would not have had the heavy casualties that we had. In addition to that, before the troops ever landed, or after the troops landed. And the war looked as if it was pretty well over, and the UN had given them the blessing to go into North Korea. They took North Korea. And then, in late October of 1950, a new war started when 260,000 Chinese troops came down into South Korea. We had to retreat. We fought every inch of the way as we were advancing to the rear. That winter was one of the coldest winters on record in Korea. One of our gentlemen who was here with us this morning, one of our veterans, tells the story about he was a forward observer and he sat on a hill. The temperature was 30 degrees below zero. The communists had them pinned down for 4.5 hours. The temperature is 30 below, and they have no winter clothing because the war is going to be over by Christmas. So he's laying there for 4.5 hours at 30 to 40 degrees below zero, depending upon the wind, waiting for something to happen. And by the way, a little sidelight to the story. The company commander of the company that was at the base of the hill had a bugler that he got in touch with, and he said, the way the Chinese communists communicate with one another is by bugle and whistle. They don't have radios. So he asked him if he could play Retreat on a Chinese bugle. He did. The Chinese retreated off the hill, and the Americans continued to the top and set up for a counterattack. At 30 degrees below zero, dressed in summer clothes. The ammunition that they were furnished didn't fire the way it was supposed to because it was old ammunition. The sea rations that were sent over to them were from World War II. When it was ice cold out there, they would open the sea rations, they would scrape the mold off. This is a true story. You would scrape the mold off, you'd cut off a little piece and put it into your mouth and melt it before you chewed it to swallow it. This is what happened when we were in Korea. But all the attention went to the Cold War in Europe. This is why this is called the Forgotten War. I'd like to just make one more comment, if I may, before I leave. This is of particular interest to the people out there who are not veterans. If you are walking around and you see a veteran with a hat that says World War II, says anything, the name of a Navy ship, an Army emblem, anything of that type, please, would you take 10 seconds out of your life to go over and shake their hand and say, thank you for your service. You have absolutely no idea what a big impression that this makes on us. One final closing point that most people don't know. 3 out of every 4 men that you see out here over the age of 80 has fought in a war. 3 out of every 4. Pay them all the respect that they are due. Thank you so much. I think I've shared with you why it's the Forgotten War. And in addition to that, I hope that you understand the sacrifices that those veterans made and the fact that we are greatly honored to be at this hallowed ground where other veterans have been and where they lie in peace. Thank you very much. God bless you all.